in the continuing whiteboard series of today, I came up with a list here. We always talk about teams that don't want to meet each other in the playoffs. And somebody was surprised by a pick that I made when I was talking about the playoffs last night. And it's based on some history that I know of that maybe it's been so long people forget. So here's 8 instances of teams who are going to look across the ice potentially in the playoffs, and I'm only rating potential matchups from this year. So if you're going, wait a minute, what about these lopsided matchups? There's no potential for those other teams to meet each other. An example would be Dallas and Detroit. Dallas's record against Detroit is atrocious. Neither of them are in the playoffs, so I don't feel the need to talk about either of them. It's not interesting. So these are the teams. I'm going to list how many series they've had in terms of who's won and lost, and their last meeting, so which year they met last, and then the result, whether it was a win or a loss, and how many games. And I know the last meeting is a much larger box than the result box. I'll make it work. So number 8 is Calgary. Doesn't want to see Edmonton. Now, I'm going to skip a box. Their last meeting was 1991. Okay, so before Calgary fans come on and go, this is so stupid. No, I get it. The thing is, their record in series is 1-4, and the only series they ever beat Edmonton in was because it went in on Steve Smith's skate. Otherwise, it's likely 0-5. The last time that they met in the playoffs, it was a loss in 7 in 91. And after that, that was when the Battle of Edmonton became nothing because, or the Battle of Alberta became nothing because Edmonton became nothing and Calgary became. They alternated who was nothing for a while there. They haven't been relevant at the same time since then, basically. It's a scary long time since they've met each other in the playoffs. It's hard to believe it's been over a quarter of a century because I'm old enough to remember these series. These series were always fun to watch, and I was always cheering for Calgary, so this record doesn't make me happy. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's a theme with this board. Number 7, Ottawa doesn't want Toronto. Their record is 0-4. Their last meeting, so again, this goes back to their last meeting problem, was in 2004, and they lost it in 7. When Ottawa plays Toronto, Ottawa fans can get excited about this all they want. Maple Leaf fans outnumber Senator fans in the stands. It's a home and home series. Toronto's always at home, and it's always frustrated the Senators. And then somehow Toronto always had better goaltending than Ottawa in the playoffs. It didn't matter how well their goaltending held together in the regular season. Laline could play great during the regular season, and then he'd see Toronto, and it was over. Um, it is a record that is impressive considering they met a lot in a very short period of time, and Toronto always beat them. So for me to say, well, if Ottawa and Toronto were playing each other, Toronto's going to knock them out. That's me remembering 2004 and going, yeah. And I know people are going to say, well, that's crazy. You can't just look at an organization that way. I'm going to get there. Nashville doesn't want San Jose. So let's say Nashville goes on an incredible run this year. Yeah, they don't want San Jose. They're 0-3 against San Jose. And of course, last year was the last time they met. I knew it was last year. I just wanted to double check. And again, they lost in 7. It's a theme to this. San Jose is a bad matchup for Nashville. Nashville does not have the depth for San Jose, and they still don't. Victor Arvidsson has come through as a scorer this year. I'm very proud to say that in last year's playoffs, if you look back to videos I did during last year's playoffs, I praised Arvidsson and said the kid was going to be fantastic, and he has been. But Nashville does not have the talent up front. They don't have the goaltending. They have the defense to match up with San Jose almost, except they don't have a Brent Burns type. They have Yossi, I know. They have PK, I know. But Burns is up here. Can't even see them on the screen. So it's a matchup this year that Nashville really, really, really doesn't want. Now, this one is lower on the board than it would have been last year. St. Louis does not want Chicago. In 12 matchups, including last season, St. Louis has only won 4 times. Last year they won in 7. If St. Louis beats Chicago in the playoffs this year, does it go to 5-8, or does it drop to 4-9? You quiet down, Blackhawk fans. I know your answer. And it's rough. It's rough because these series are always good, but usually Chicago's a little bit better. And last year was the exception. The problem is Chicago over the last decade has shown that any time that they lose in the playoffs, they come back better the following season. And there's no reason to think that that won't still happen. They've still got that core. And St. Louis does not have that core. They do not have a core that can compete with Chicago's, not in a big game. Number 4, and this is going to be a bit of a similar situation, the Minnesota Wild. And based on right now, it's not looking good for them. The last time they met was in 2015. It was a sweep. It was Minnesota-Chicago. Minnesota has never beaten Chicago in the playoffs in 3 chances. Could this be the year? Absolutely. Absolutely. Calgary knocked off Edmonton the one year. Edmonton was a juggernaut. Absolutely. Minnesota could knock off Chicago. Are they going to? That's the problem. They definitely have something going on here. Minnesota's had this special run. That run is now over. They're now 7 points back at Chicago. If they meet in the playoffs, Chicago's got home ice. This could turn to 0-4 really quick. Number 3. Don't worry. Chicago doesn't appear on the rest of this board. The Rangers don't want Pittsburgh. The Rangers' career record against Pittsburgh is 2-5. And they met last year. And the result was a 5-game victory for Pittsburgh. This is where the speed showed up last year, was Pittsburgh against the Rangers. And the Rangers are a fast team. But Pittsburgh is scary. And the Rangers really don't want to meet the Penguins. Which is why, if you're a Rangers fan right now, you got to be thinking, okay, right now we're the number 1 wild card. We're going to play the best team in the Atlantic. That works out better for us. It probably does. That's probably true. Number 2. And this is if those pricks get off their butts and get into the playoffs. If. And right now I'm not even watching the game right now. I'm just pissed. I cannot handle watching them not show up, and they haven't shown up again. Big game against Ottawa, and they're just dilly-dallying around the ice. Boston does not want Montreal in the playoffs. You guys ready for this record? They've beat Montreal 9 times. They've knocked Montreal out of playoffs 9 times. So what's the problem? They've lost 25 times to Montreal in the playoffs. The most recent time was 2014. I remember all too well. Because up until that 7th game, I really thought Boston had them. I really thought it was going to be 10-24. And then it just didn't work out that way, did it? So when other fans of other teams complain about their records, as a Boston fan, I just nod and go, yeah, I know how that feels. You know what's number 1, don't you? You know exactly what's number 1. You know exactly what team doesn't want to face which other team in the playoffs this year. Oh, the groaning. Oh, the complaining. And I even heard it today on Hockey Central that this is a matchup that looks really, really bad. And it's bad. I want to see Washington break through. I want to see the Capitals break through. But if they meet Pittsburgh, they're done. And I almost had Washington Rangers on this board. Because the Rangers' record against Washington's pretty darn good too, especially lately. But I thought, no, I'm going to get Calgary, Edmonton on here. I got to get Ottawa, Toronto on here, and San Jose and Nashville because that was last year. But man, Pittsburgh could essentially go through Washington. They could go through the Rangers. They could go through Columbus and find themselves in the final again after taking out 3 of their nemesis. So yeah, as I said, if you're gonna question why Detroit's not on this board, it's because Detroit's not in the playoffs. Colorado's not on the board because they're not in the playoffs. Edmonton is only on here because anybody else that they took out regularly isn't in the playoffs. Whether it's the Kings, whether it's the Canucks. If the Canucks were in the playoffs this year, there'd be mention of the Canucks on this board. There'd be the Canucks in Chicago, definitely. Probably Canucks and Calgary would be a main one too, because the Canucks do not have a good playoff record against Calgary. Ironically, though, the 2 times out of 7 that they have broken through against the Flames, Vancouver's gone to the Stanley Cup final. Then there's an eerie record between Calgary too. Calgary's gone to the Stanley Cup final twice after beating the Canucks. I don't think they beat them in '86. I don't think they met in '86. But if they did, then it's 3 times. It's one of those weird things, but it doesn't belong on this board. So here's my question to you. These are the 8 matchups that look just awful. Habs fans will be happy with that Montreal-Boston one, though. Which of these matchups do you think is most likely to break I don't want to call it a curse, but which one of these do you think is going to change this year? Does Minnesota break through against Chicago? Does Nashville break through if they get to that conference final against San Jose? Does Ottawa break Toronto somehow? Because what fans in Ottawa don't understand is once Toronto fans get some modicum of success, they become almost as bad as Canuck fans for being arrogant. And it can be really obnoxious. It can be really difficult to deal with. And it can be really difficult for Ottawa to go on the ice and get booed at home. And it was a problem in 2004. And it was a problem in any of the rounds they had before that. Because in the playoffs, when you're the home team, you should be getting cheered. And in Ottawa, Toronto, that doesn't always happen. Same thing with Montreal and Ottawa. Montreal fans will get into that Ottawa stadium and they will sometimes be louder than the Ottawa fans themselves. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And let me know if there's any matchups that you think should be on the board. But again, you have to consider this. I don't care about a team that, these teams have met each other twice in the last 2 years and this one's won twice. No, I'm talking about like traditionally, historically. And for the most part, outside of these 2, I stuck with teams that have met each other in the last 3 years. And outside of the Boston Montreal, I stuck with teams that have met each other in the last 2 years. To make my point here that there's certain rivalries that may be passionate, but they're one-sided. Traditionally, they're one-sided. It's not a tradition yet with Minnesota and Chicago, but if these 2 teams meet in the second round and Chicago wins, we're getting into tradition territory. So let me know what you guys think. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. I may watch the Boston Montreal. The Boston Ottawa game starting in the second. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Boston has to show up though. Tuukka has to make a save or 2. Something's got to happen because it's just getting frustrating. Boston's going to miss in the playoffs, and Tampa's going to be in here. And if Tampa gets in, there's teams that don't want to play Tampa. Tampa's playoff record is scary. There's certain teams that are great in the playoffs and certain teams that are bad, and I'm going to get into that over the next few weeks too. Because again, we can all talk about this season like it exists in a ball and it's its own entity, but there is some history that will seep over into things. Certain teams that have this big weight on their shoulder, named Washington. Certain teams that when they look across the ice, they go, oh God, not again. Boston with Montreal. Certain teams that go, wait, why aren't we being cheered? Ottawa with Toronto. Certain teams that go, wow, this feels like the 80s. Calgary, Edmonton. When I watched Edmonton, Calgary this year, I was like, oh my God, it's the 80s again. Except now it's McDavid instead of Gretzky. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And thanks for watching. And I'll talk to you all again soon.